He was Seoul's most ruthless loan shark who owned half the city's underground. She was the Nigerian exchange student who walked into his office to beg for her father's life and walked out with his heart in her hands instead. Brace yourself. This love will cost them everything. The rain fell hard over Gangnam that night, the kind of rain that washed blood off sidewalks and secrets into gutters. Inside the Black Pearl building, 50 floors above the neon chaos, Park Ji-hoon sat in his leather chair, counting money that wasn't really money, it was power, fear, control. They called him the Reaper in Seoul's underworld. Not because he killed people, though he could, but because when he came for what you owed, you paid, one way or another. His office was exactly what you'd expect from a man who dealt in fear. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the Han River, black marble floors that reflected the city lights like a dark mirror, and furniture so expensive it could pay off half the debts he collected. On his desk sat 3 phones, one for business, one for family, one for the kind of calls that could never be traced. Tonight, he was expecting someone, a debtor. A fool named Emmanuel Okafor who'd borrowed 500 million won to start some import business and hadn't paid a single installment in 4 months. Ji-hoon had sent 3 warnings, then 5, then 10, each one more explicit about what would happen if the money didn't appear. Emmanuel had ignored them all. Big mistake. His assistant, Yong-sik, knocked twice. Never once, never 3 times, always twice. That was the code that meant someone was here. Boss, someone's here about the Okafor debt. Ji-hoon didn't look up from his ledger. The numbers were always honest, even when people weren't. Send him in. Let's finish this quickly. I have dinner at 9. The door opened. But it wasn't Emmanuel Okafor who walked in. It was a woman, no, a girl, early 20s maybe. Dark skin that glowed even under the harsh fluorescent lights, her hair wrapped in a colorful silk scarf, geometric patterns in gold and deep purple that caught the light when she moved. She wore a simple black dress, modest but elegant, the kind that spoke of someone who understood that presentation mattered but couldn't afford expensive things. And she clutched a brown envelope in both hands like it was a shield or maybe a white flag. Her eyes, large, determined, afraid, but refusing to show it, met his directly. Most people couldn't hold Ji-hoon's gaze for more than 3 seconds. She didn't look away. Ji-hoon's pen stopped moving. "Who are you?" he asked in Korean, his voice flat, giving nothing away. She answered in broken but confident Korean, each word carefully pronounced, like she'd practiced this moment 100 times. "I am Chidera Okafor, Emmanuel's daughter. I come to talk about debt." Yong-sik shifted uncomfortably by the door. In 15 years of working for Ji-hoon, he'd never seen a debtor send their daughter. Wives, yes. Mothers, occasionally. But a daughter? That was new. That was either desperation or strategy. "Leave us," Ji-hoon said, his eyes never leaving her. Yong-sik hesitated. "Boss, should I?" I said leave. The door clicked shut, and suddenly the massive office felt smaller, more intimate, more dangerous. Chidera stayed standing, even though there was a chair right in front of her. Pride, he recognized immediately, the kind that got people killed in his world, the kind that made them take risks they couldn't afford. "Your father owes me 500 million won," Ji-hoon said, switching to English. His accent was crisp, cold, perfect. He'd spent 3 years at UCLA before his father died, and duty dragged him back to Seoul. "Where is he?" "He's sick," she said, her voice steady despite the fear flickering behind her eyes like a candle in the wind. "He had a stroke 2 weeks ago. He's in Severance Hospital. He can't walk, he can't work, he can't pay." "That's unfortunate," Ji-hoon said, leaning back in his chair. The leather creaked softly. "But his health problems are not my concern. His debt is. Money doesn't care about strokes or hospital beds or sob stories. Money just wants to come home." "I know." She stepped forward, placing the envelope on his desk. Her hands trembled slightly, but her voice didn't. "That's why I'm here. I'll pay it." He almost laughed. Almost. "You'll pay 500 million won?" "Yes." "How?" He tilted his head, genuinely curious now. "You're a student. International tuition alone is 20 million won a year. You work part-time at a convenience store in Etowon, making maybe 9,000 won an hour. Your father's business is bankrupt. Your bank account, yes, I checked, has 1.2 million won in it. So tell me, Chidera Okafor, how exactly will you pay me 500 million won?" She didn't flinch at the fact that he knew everything about her finances. Maybe she expected it. Maybe she was too tired to be surprised. She lifted her chin higher, and Ji-hoon saw his grandmother in that gesture. He saw generations of women who'd survived things that should have broken them. "However you need me to," she said quietly. The room went silent. Even the rain seemed to pause. Even the city outside held its breath. Ji-hoon studied her, really studied her. Her hands weren't shaking anymore. Her breathing was controlled, measured. She'd practiced this, walked through this door knowing exactly what kind of man she was facing, what kind of monster lived in offices like this. And she came anyway. Most people who walked into his office left with less than they came with. She'd walked in with nothing and was offering even more than that. She was offering herself. "Do you understand what you just offered?" he asked quietly, dangerously. "Yes." "Do you know what men like me do with offers like that?" "Yes." He stood slowly, walking around the desk until he was close enough to see the tiny silver cross hanging from her neck, half hidden beneath her collar. Close enough to smell her perfume, something floral and cheap from a street vendor. Not the expensive French fragrances the women in his world wore. Close enough to see that her lipstick was slightly smudged, like she'd been biting her lip in the elevator on the way up. "Then you're either very brave," he said softly, his voice dropping to almost a whisper, "or very stupid." "I'm desperate," she corrected, meeting his eyes without wavering. "There's a difference." Something flickered in his chest, something he hadn't felt in years, maybe ever. Curiosity, respect, something else he didn't have a name for yet. He returned to his chair, putting distance between them before he did something foolish. "Sit down." She sat, finally, perching on the edge of the chair like she might need to run at any moment. "Tell me about yourself," he said. The request clearly surprised her. "What?" "Your father borrowed money from me. That makes him my business. But you walked in here offering to pay his debt. That makes you my business too. So tell me, what do you study?" She blinked, recalibrating. "Business, international trade, at Yonsei University." "Good school, expensive." "Full scholarship," she said quickly, and he heard the pride in her voice. "Top 5% of international applicants." "Smart then." He made a note on his tablet. "And your father's business?" "African goods. Food, fabric, cosmetics. He supplies Nigerian stores here in Itaewon and Dongdaemun." Her voice softened, and he heard the love in it, the loyalty. It was doing well, really well. "We were planning to expand to Busan, until his business partner, a Korean man named Mr. Choi, stole everything from the warehouse and disappeared. 3 months of inventory, gone. That's when my father had to borrow money to restock, and then—" Her voice cracked slightly. "Then he had the stroke." Ji-hoon had heard 1,000 sob stories in this office. They all blurred together after a while, became white noise, became excuses. But something about the way she told it, no tears, no drama, just facts delivered with the exhaustion of someone who'd cried all their tears, already made him actually listen. "This Mr. Choi," Ji-hoon said. "You know where he is?" "No, he disappeared. The police won't help because—" She hesitated. "Because your father's a foreigner, and Choi's Korean, and the police don't care about foreigners' business problems," Ji-hoon finished. "Yes, I know how it works." She nodded, grateful that he understood. that she didn't have to explain the racism she'd been fighting since she arrived in this country that was beautiful and brutal in equal measure. Ji-hoon was quiet for a long moment, his fingers steepled in front of his face. Outside, the rain picked up again, drumming against the windows like impatient fingers. Finally, he spoke. "I'll make you a deal," he said. Her eyes widened. Hope and fear mixed together in her expression. "What kind of deal?" "You work for me, 6 months. Every day after your classes, you come here. You handle my foreign clients. Nigerians, Americans, Europeans, Middle Eastern businessmen. I need someone who speaks English like a native, understands their culture, can make them comfortable before I take everything they own." "You want me to help you destroy people like my father?" Her voice cracked with something between anger and disbelief. "No," he said calmly. "I want you to help me get paid. There's a difference. These people borrow money knowing the terms. They think they're smarter than me, that they can run, that they can hide. You'll help me prove them wrong. You do this, and every week I'll reduce your father's debt by 10 million won. 6 months, debt cleared. Your father lives. You finish school, everyone wins." Chidera stared at him, trying to find the trap, the catch, the place where the deal turned poisonous. "Why would you do this? You could just take everything. You could—" "I could," he interrupted, "but here's what you don't understand about my business. Fear is temporary. Loyalty is permanent. If I destroy your father, you'll hate me forever, and one day that hate might cost me. But if I give you a way to save him, if I give you a path to redemption, then you'll remember that. You'll be grateful. And gratitude, Miss Okafor, is more valuable than money." It was partially true, but the fuller truth, the one he wouldn't admit even to himself, was simpler. She'd walked into his office and looked at him like he was human, and he couldn't remember the last time that had happened. Chidera was quiet for a long moment, her mind clearly racing, calculating odds, weighing options she didn't really have. Then she said, "I want it in writing." He smiled, actually smiled, a real one that touched his eyes for half a second. "Smart girl. And I want one more thing." His smile faded. "You're negotiating with me?" "Yes." Her voice didn't waver. "You don't touch my father, no matter what happens. If I fail, if I run, if I mess up, if anything goes wrong, you let him go. You take it out on me, not him. Put that in the contract." Ji-hoon leaned forward, studying her with new intensity. "You're willing to put yourself on the line for a man who gambled his family's future on a bad business deal, who trusted the wrong person, who got you into this mess." "He's my father," she said simply, like it was the most obvious thing in the world. "That's what love does. It makes you stupid. It makes you sacrifice. It makes you walk into offices like this and make deals with men like you." And there it was again. That strange, unfamiliar warmth in his chest, like sunlight touching a place that had been dark for so long he'd forgotten light existed. "Deal," he said quietly. She exhaled, relief flooding her face so completely that she looked 5 years younger. For a moment, she was just a girl again, not a woman carrying the weight of her father's mistakes. "One more thing," he added as she turned to leave. She stopped, turned back, waiting. "You call me Sajangnim, boss, nothing else. And when you're here, you forget everything you learned in church about mercy and forgiveness. In this building, I'm the only God that matters. These walls don't care about your prayers. Understood?" She nodded slowly, some of the relief draining from her face as she remembered exactly who she'd just made a deal with. "Yes, Sajangnim." "Good. You start tomorrow. 6 p.m. sharp. Don't be late. I don't give second chances." She walked out, and the door closed softly behind her, and Ji-hoon sat in the dark for a long time after she left, staring at the envelope she'd brought. Finally, curiosity won. He opened it. Inside, 500,000 won. All in small bills, some of them wrinkled, some of them torn and taped back together. Probably every bit of savings she had. Money earned from late-night convenience store shifts and weekend tutoring jobs and skipped meals. Not even 1% of what her father owed. But she'd brought it anyway. Ji-hoon held one of the bills up to the light, and for reasons he couldn't explain, he folded it carefully and put it in his wallet instead of adding it to the deposit. Young-sik came back in. "Boss, what do you want me to do about Okafor?" "Nothing," Ji-hoon said quietly, still staring at his wallet. He just bought himself 6 months. Because of the girl? Because of the deal? But they both knew that was a lie. The next evening, Chidera arrived at exactly 6 p.m. Not 5:59, not 6:01, exactly 6. She wore a simple white blouse and black slacks, her hair wrapped differently, a more conservative style, professional, serious. She dressed for business, for survival. Ji-hoon handed her a tablet without preamble. "There's a Brazilian man named Costa who owes me 200 million won. He's been avoiding my calls for 3 weeks. You're going to call him and schedule a meeting. What do I say?" She took the tablet carefully, like it might explode. "Whatever makes him show up." Ji-hoon leaned against his desk, watching her carefully. "But here's the rule. You never lie. You don't pretend things are okay. You don't promise anything I won't deliver. You tell them the truth, that I'm coming for what they owe, that running makes it worse, that talking to me is their best option, but you make them believe it. You make them want to come. Can you do that?" "I don't know," she admitted. "I've never—" "Try," he said simply. She looked at the number, took a breath, and dialed. Ji-hoon watched as her expression shifted, as she became someone else. Her voice changed, warmer, more sympathetic, but with an undercurrent of steel. She spoke in Portuguese, the words flowing naturally, beautifully. Ji-hoon understood maybe 1 word in 10, but he understood tone, understood manipulation, understood the art of making someone do what you wanted while making them think it was their idea. "Senor Costa? My name is Chidera. I work for Mr. Park. Yes, about the loan. I understand you've been busy." No, he's not angry. He just wants to talk, find a solution that works for everyone. "Tomorrow at 2? Perfect. Thank you, senor." "Yes, have a blessed day." She hung up and looked at Ji-hoon, uncertain. "He'll be here tomorrow at 2. Ji-hoon was impressed, though he didn't show it. "Where did you learn Portuguese?" "My mother was from Angola," she said quietly, and something in her voice told him not to ask more. "She died when I was 12. He nodded, filed that information away in the place where he kept things that mattered. "You did well." "Thank you, Sejongnim." For the next 2 weeks, Chidera came every evening at exactly 6 p.m. She scheduled meetings, translated conversations in 5 different languages, made tea for nervous debtors in the exact way they liked it. She watched Ji-hoon work, cold, efficient, terrifying, but she never looked away, never flinched when his voice dropped to that dangerous whisper, never ran when men begged and cried and promised everything. She took notes, learned, adapted. And slowly, something shifted. He started asking her opinion. "This man says his mother needs surgery. Do you believe him?" She'd look at the file, scan the bank records, think carefully. "Yes, his hospital payments go back 3 months. Same hospital, same department. He's not lying." "Then we give him 2 more weeks." Young-sik would stare in disbelief. The Reaper showing mercy? But it wasn't mercy. It was Chidera. Her presence in that dark office was like light creeping through cracks in a boarded-up window. She made him see people instead of numbers, made him remember that every debt had a face, a story, a reason. One evening, she asked him, "Why do you do this? You're obviously smart enough to do anything. Why this?" He was quiet for a long time. Then, "My father owned a restaurant, small place in Hongdae. A man he considered a friend convinced him to invest in a business opportunity. It was a scam. My father lost everything. The restaurant, our house. His pride. The man who scammed him was rich, connected, untouchable. The police did nothing. The courts did nothing. My father died of a heart attack 6 months later. I was 19. Chidera's expression softened. I'm sorry. Don't be. It taught me how the world really works. Money is the only language everyone speaks, the only power that matters, so I learned to speak it fluently. He looked at her. Your father's partner, this Mr. Choi. He didn't steal from your father because he was evil. He did it because he could, because he knew your father had no power to stop him. That's the world we live in. But you're giving me a chance to save my father, she said quietly. Doesn't that contradict everything you just said? Maybe, he admitted. Or maybe you're the exception that proves the rule. She smiled, and it was the first real smile he'd seen from her. I'll take being an exception. One night, after all the staff had gone home, Ji-hoon found her crying in the small break room. Quiet tears, the kind you try to hide, the kind that hurt more because they're silent. What happened? He asked from the doorway, his voice gentler than usual. She wiped her face quickly, embarrassed. Nothing. I'm fine. He didn't leave, didn't push, just waited. Finally, the hospital called. My father's getting worse. They need to do another surgery, but... She laughed bitterly, a sound that cut him. Money. It's always money. They need 30 million won by next week or they'll have to discharge him, send him home to die. Ji-hoon was quiet. Then, how much? I'm not asking you for... How much, Chidera? She looked at him, and for the first time he saw real desperation, the kind that makes people do terrible things. 30 million won, she whispered. But I can work more hours, I can... He pulled out his phone, made a call, spoke quickly in Korean, hung up. It's done. The hospital will have the money in an hour. The surgery happens tomorrow. Her eyes went wide with shock. Sejongnim, I can't accept. It comes out of your father's debt, he said quickly, turning away before she could see something in his face he wasn't ready to show. You'll work an extra month, that's all. But they both knew the math didn't work. 30 million won meant 3 more weeks at most. He was giving her a month. He was showing mercy. Thank you, she breathed, and her voice broke on the words. Thank you, I don't know how to... Don't thank me, he said coldly, desperately trying to rebuild the walls she was tearing down. It's still business. Your father dies, the debt dies with him. I'm just protecting my investment. But when he walked away, his hands were shaking. And when he got home that night to his empty penthouse, he poured himself whiskey he didn't drink and stared at the city lights and wondered when exactly he'd become the kind of man who cared whether a stranger's father lived or died. The answer came to him around 3 a.m., the moment she'd walked into his office and looked at him like he was human. 3 months in, everything changed. A man named Kwon Tae-seung walked into Ji-hoon's office unannounced. No appointment, no warning, just barged in like he owned the place. Tall, scarred, dangerous. He wore a suit that cost more than most people made in a year and smiled like a shark that had just smelled blood in the water. He was Ji-hoon's biggest rival, someone who'd been trying to take his territory for years. Heard you got yourself a new pet, Tae-seung said, smirking as he sat down without being invited. African girl. Pretty thing. Chidera, right? Ji-hoon's expression didn't change, but his hand moved slightly closer to the drawer where he kept his gun. State your business or leave. She's your weakness, Ji-hoon, ah? Tae-seung leaned forward, enjoying this. I've been watching. You've gone soft, giving extensions, reducing debts, showing mercy, all because of her. You're wrong. Am I? Tae-seung dropped a folder on the desk. Ji-hoon opened it. His blood turned to ice. Photos, dozens of them. Chidera leaving the office. Chidera at the hospital visiting her father. Chidera at her tiny apartment in Itaewon. Chidera at church on Sunday morning, praying with her eyes closed. Someone had been following her for weeks. "Touch her," Ji-hoon said quietly, and his voice dropped to something ancient and deadly. "And I'll burn everything you've ever built to the ground. I'll destroy your family, your business, your name. I'll erase you so completely that people will forget you ever existed." Tae-sung laughed, delighted. "There it is. The truth. You care about her. Which means she's leverage. Which means she's mine whenever I want her." He stood, adjusted his jacket casually. "I'll give you 1 week to decide. You hand over your Gangnam operations, all of them. Every loan, every client, every territory, or she disappears, permanently. And before she does, I'll make sure she suffers. I'll make sure you hear her beg." The door closed behind him. Ji-hoon sat frozen, staring at the photos, at her face, unguarded, unaware that monsters were circling. For the first time in 15 years, Park Ji-hoon felt something he'd thought he'd killed a long time ago. Fear. That evening, when Chidera arrived at exactly 6 p.m. like always, Ji-hoon was waiting by the elevator. "You're not coming up today," he said, his voice flat, emotionless. She frowned, confused. "Why? Did I do something wrong? Did a client complain?" "No, you're done. The deal's off. Your father's debt is cleared." "What?" She stared at him like he'd spoken another language. "But I still have 3 months left." "I said it's cleared." His voice was ice, pure ice. "Go home. Don't come back." Confusion and hurt flashed across her face like she'd been slapped. "I don't understand. Did someone say something? Was it—" "Just go, Chidera." He turned away because he couldn't look at her face anymore. She grabbed his arm, and even through his suit, he felt the warmth of her hand. "Tell me what happened." He looked down at her hand on his sleeve. So small, so trusting, so breakable. "Someone threatened you," he said quietly, giving her at least that much truth. "Because of me, because I was stupid enough to let you get close." Her eyes widened. "Who? Tell me who, and we'll—" "There is no we." He pulled his arm away. "There's a boss and an employee. That's all this ever was. You did your job. Now it's done." "You're lying." "Am I?" He forced himself to look cold, detached. Every lesson his father never taught him, and the streets did. "You were useful. Now you're a liability. That's how this works. That's how it's always worked." Tears filled her eyes, and each one felt like a knife in his chest. "I don't believe you." "Believe what you want." He pressed the elevator button for her. "But if you're still in Seoul by tomorrow morning, I'll have you deported myself. You and your father. I'll make sure you can never come back." "Why are you doing this?" Her voice broke. The elevator arrived. The doors opened. He stepped back. "Because I'm not the man you think I am," he said simply. "I never was." Behind him, Young-sik watched from the office doorway, his face tight with something like pity. "Sajangnam." Chidera tried one more time. "Go," Ji-hoon said, and his voice was colder than she'd ever heard it, colder than the first day, colder than winter. "Now." She stepped into the elevator, tears streaming down her face. As the doors started to close, he finally looked at her one last time, and she saw it. Everything he couldn't say. The truth he'd been fighting for 3 months. The thing that terrified him more than Tae-sung's threats, more than losing his empire, more than dying. He'd fallen in love with her. The doors shut, and Chidera stood alone in the descending elevator, crying and smiling at the same time through her tears, because she knew now. Park Ji-hoon, Seoul's most ruthless loan shark, the reaper who collected debts without mercy, had fallen in love with her, and he was pushing her away to save her life. But across the city, in an office much darker than Ji-hoon's, Kwon Tae-sing watched the security footage and smiled like the devil counting souls. "Perfect," he said to his men, who stood in the shadows like loyal dogs waiting for a command. "She's emotional now, vulnerable. That's when people make mistakes. That's when they're easiest to break." He checked his watch, a Patek Philippe that cost more than most people's cars. Give her 2 hours to get home and let her guard down. Then grab her, make it clean, no witnesses, and bring her to the warehouse in Incheon, the one by the docks. One of his men hesitated. Boss, if we do this, Park Ji-hoon will... Will what? Tae-sung's smile widened. Declare war? That's exactly what I want. He's weak now, emotional. Emotions make men stupid. By the time he realizes what's happened, it'll be too late. And then we'll see how much he's really willing to lose for his little African princess. The men nodded and disappeared into the night like smoke, and the rain started falling again, harder than before, washing away the last traces of safety. In her apartment, Chidera cried into her pillow, unaware that monsters were coming. In his office, Ji-hoon stared at the photo of her smiling, taken by men who wanted to hurt her, and made a decision. He opened his bottom drawer, pulled out a gun he hadn't touched in 3 years, and began to plan for war, to be continued. If this story has you hooked, drop a fire emoji in the comments. Part 2 drops in 48 hours where everything goes wrong, blood is spilled, and Ji-hoon has to choose between his empire and the only woman who ever made him feel human. Hit subscribe. You don't want to miss what happens when the Reaper stops collecting debts and starts collecting bodies instead. Thank you for watching and see you soon.